Welcome everyone, I'm Clay Baker and this is Motonexus. If you've turned a single wrench in your life, you've encountered a stuck nut or bolt. Rust, corrosion, over-tightening, they're all challenges that a good penetrating oil can solve. I have bought hundreds of bottles of cans and stuff, but my favorite is something I make at home when it comes to breaking loose a rusty, crusty nut. Today I'm going to do a completely unscientific experiment to see which is better, my homemade penetrating oil or the stuff that I buy at the store. Let's do the test today on Motonexus. These are my test subjects, just stuff I picked up off the shelf. I use them myself all the time. WD-40. Let's get that. PB Blaster, and my own mix, a combination of the cheapest ATF fluid I can find and some acetone. For my own mix, which I call loose nuts, I mix 50-50 ratio of automatic transmission fluid, as I said, cheapest stuff I can find, and some acetone, and give it a swirl to mix. Start at about 3 ounces of acetone. So here's my test. A bunch of identical, brand new nuts and bolts. I'm using galvanized bolts because I think that when the oil gets on the threads, it'll show it better on the camera. To allow for variations, I'm going to use the same product on 3 bolts and let them sit for 5 minutes. Now furthermore, to try to make this a little more accurate, to make sure I count the threads exactly the same, I'm going to place a mark on each nut and each bolt so that I install the nuts to exactly the same depth and count the threads from exactly the same point on each bolt. And then I'm going to let all this sit for 5 minutes, right? Now, 5 minutes is way longer than any human being has ever waited for penetrating oil to do its job, all right? After 5 minutes, I'll remove the nuts and count the oily threads going down on the same side of each bolt. All right, so I've lined up all the bolts so that the least amount of thread is showing at the tip of each one with the faces all exactly the same. And what I'm going to do is put a mark on each bolt so that they're on the same side and I'm counting the same amount of threads. So all the bolts have been marked. And then you'll notice there's a mark on this nut. And I've spun it on 3 full revolutions. I'm going to do the same for all the other bolts, and then we'll get started applying our oils. All right, so in the first row, we're going to do WD-40. And then the middle row will be PB Blaster. And then my mixture of loose nuts down here. Now let's start the clock. Okay, it's been 5 minutes, and on top of the bolts you can see there's just a little bit of excess left. So to stop that, it's gonna dab it out, dry it up. We don't want any of that dripping down the bolt when we take the nut off. Okay, so we'll take the nuts off and we'll see if we can see how wet the threads are going down. So we'll start with the WD-40. And I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4 threads. If you can see that. Looks like I'm getting 4 threads wet. Go to the PB Blaster. This particular bolt I got very wet on the outside, so I can't count it. Let's see if I've got a better one here. Here we go. PB Blaster, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 threads. And on my homemade solution, it's dripped out from under the bolt and it's still going down on that one. Same on this one. And you can see on this one, it's completely cleared through the nut. That one got about 5 threads. Some of this at the bottom sprayed across from the bolt above it, so my test wasn't very good. Now that this is set for a while, we can see that WD-40 made its way further down. And this one has finally passed through and is saturated almost all the way down the bolt. So what does this little test tell us? I'm not even sure it was much of a test, but it does show us that in the shortest amount of time, the automatic transmission fluid with acetone, what I call loose nuts, worked the fastest. It started leaking out below the nut before the others did, and when allowed to sit longer while I was performing the test, the WD-40 and the PB Blaster finally found their way out of the nut. Now, let's think about this for a second, because I gave everybody an edge. These are not machine bolts, they're construction bolts, so there is a bit of a loose fit. A machine bolt would be much tighter. I used these galvanized bolts because I thought it'd be easier to see the oil, and it was. So in terms of winner, loose nuts gets the speed award and probably the cost award, which we can talk about, but all 3 of them are fine products. So let's talk cost. In my area, which is one of the most expensive cities in the United States, your prices may vary. A 12-ounce can of WD-40 costs roughly 83 cents an ounce. A 11-ounce can, yep, this is 11 ounces, of PB Blaster runs about 73 cents an ounce. That's without sales tax and all of that. That's just the retail price. My mix of acetone and automatic transmission fluid runs just under 15 cents an ounce. So it's very, very cheap to make. So if it doesn't work for you on your rusty nuts and bolts, it's going to sting a little less because it was cheaper. To be fair to WD-40 and PB Blaster, I bought them for my own use. I didn't buy them for this test, for this video. Heck, I've got about 8 cans somewhere around the shop, and I use it all the time. WD-40 is arguably the most versatile lubricant that we tested. It can be used for all kinds of lubrication and penetrating oil jobs that you've got around your shop. PB Blaster and my mix have a very specific purpose: loosen rusty stuck nuts and bolts. However, there's a big caveat. With the mix of acetone and automatic transmission fluid, you do have a strong solvent, the acetone that's in the product. You do not want this stuff to get on painted surfaces or any kind of plastics, and some rubbers too, because it will dissolve them. I hope this was helpful or at least entertaining. There are lots more videos to come, so please click that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell your friends. Thank you very much.